So Paroxycus asks, I've been watching a lot of you stream State of Decay 2 lately, and I've noticed that a lot of people have gone from using explosives on plague hearts to using heavy weapons. What's up with that? So that actually dates back to when the lethal zone was brand new. So when we implemented the other 3 difficulty levels, or I guess when we implemented the other difficulty levels, one thing that we were contending with was the difficulty of fighting plague hearts. A lot of players had sort of come up with dominant strategies that made it so easy to fight a plague heart that they were just sort of a trivial problem. And plague hearts are meant to be the toughest battles in the game. And so we really wanted to make sure that as we were raising the difficulty of the game, we were specifically making plague hearts more difficult to fight. And so a couple of the dominant strategies that people had developed was 50 cal rifles. Because of the amount of damage we wanted them to do to juggernauts, they also, at the same time, did a lot of extra damage to plague hearts. And people got to the point where they were realizing I could just kill a plague heart in like 3 shots from far away as long as I got a good angle on it with a 50 cal rifle. And so we tried to nerf 50 cal rifles. We gave them smaller magazines. We did a bunch of stuff to them. And they were just dominantly powerful. Similarly, C4 was really, really powerful. You leave a brick of C4 there, you take it down an entire tier or more, depending on the difficulty level. That was really powerful. And also, there were a lot of flame weapons, like particularly, you could just set it on fire. That was powerful. But particularly the, what's it called? That fireworks gun? The pyro launcher. The pyro launcher was especially powerful at taking down plague hearts. And because people had established these dominant strategies where plague hearts were just easy as crap to take down, we were worried that, if we just raise the difficulty a little bit in lethal, that was just going to make it not any more interesting. It's like people are like, oh yeah, now it's 4 shots with my 50 cal instead of 3. Whoop-de-doo, and it wouldn't feel like we had really raised the difficulty level. And we were going to get a lot of complaints from lethal players because that particular segment of our player base, they want the game to be as hard as humanly possible. And there's really no amount of difficulty we could add to the game that would really satisfy them. And so we were like, okay, what can we do to make it genuinely difficult to fight a plague heart? And what we realized was most of the options you have for fighting a plague heart are options that are either hit and run, where you get in close to the plague heart, do something, and then run away again without ever fighting a zombie. And a lot of the other ones were, things like the 50 cal, where you just try to find a nice window angle and you do it from on top of your car really far away. So we're like, okay, but there's one method that you really have to stand there and use, and that's melee. And so what we did was we decided that melee was going to be the dominant strategy for defeating plague hearts in the lethal zone. And so in the difficulty tuning that we actually have all the different types of damage that apply to a plague heart, and we have percentages, a place where we can basically set percentages on those to nerf your damage against a plague heart, depending on what difficulty you're at. And so at all the normal, so most of those damage levels, they just sort of they get nerfed at about the same rate, but at lethal, everything gets nerfed really hard except for melee weapon damage. Melee weapon damage stays high. And because heavy weapons in particular do the most hit point damage, most weapons, they're designed for fighting regular zombies, which don't have hit points. They just have a chance of death. And so things like blades are really effective because they raise that chance of death and how fast it escalates as you're hitting a zombie again and again and rolling the dice on it dying. But certain enemies, plague hearts, juggernauts, they actually have hit points. And so heavy weapons are designed for fighting those, and they do much more hit point damage than other weapons comparatively. And so that's why heavy weapons have become the dominant strategy for fighting plague hearts in the lethal zone. It's because we nerfed the damage on everything else but kept melee damage effective. And that was specifically so that if you're fighting in the lethal zone, sure, you can still use those other strategies, but they're expensive and resources are really expensive. Trying to get enough fuel or enough ammo to fund a 50 cal strategy or a pyro launcher strategy, it's a little bit tougher. You have to actually, you're losing something when you use those methods. It's a lot cheaper to get in there and use a heavy weapon. And because it's so much more effective, that became the strategy that most lethal players use, which means lethal players are forced to put themselves continuously in danger from zombie attack, unless they use scent block or a smoke bomb or the Echo Mamba. So there's still stuff people can do, but you'll notice there's a lot of different strategies there, and it's more interesting to be grappling with it when it comes to, using melee weapons against a plague heart. And so I think honestly, there's a lot of places where the difficulty tuning of our game is weird, or where other balance tuning in our game is weird. I think that was one area, though, where I think we made the right choice, where, you know, making heavy weapons be the dominant strategy against a Plague Heart actually made the game harder in a more interesting way. Not just hard in a way where like things are more expensive or things take longer, but it actually made the game harder on lethal because you had to expose yourself to that level of risk. So there's the answer to that question. I did a bunch of other talking to the chat, and I didn't include it in this episode. So you should follow my Twitch channel if you want to engage in the scintillating back and forth where I mostly ignore the chat and say whatever I want.